Um, well, I've offered many times through WTA because I believe that there is a sort of sensitivity, and I've been told that that's not a good time. In March, when everything happened, I've reached out to all the players that I personally know and I still have a good relationship with. I'm talking about Ukrainian players, of course. And, I don't feel that forcing myself to speak to somebody who maybe doesn't want to speak to me for different reasons is the right approach, but I offered. I feel like I've had a very clear message from the beginning is that I'm here to try to help, which I have done a lot, maybe not something that people see. And that's not what I do it for. I do it for people who in need, juniors who need clothes, other people who need money, other people who needed transportation or whatever. That's what is important to me, to have people are in need. If Marta wants to speak with me, like she texted me yesterday, I've replied. I'm open to any time to listen, to try to understand, to sympathize. I believe that empathy in a moment like this is really important, which has, again, been my clear message in the beginning. And I'm going to stand by that because what's happening in the world is very difficult right now, but we shouldn't forget that we're all human and we should treat each other that way.
We're all human and we should treat each other that way. Isolt, we're going to put up on a screen the first part of this, how it broke out. This course in the, this is actually quite a good article from the Daily Mirror, that Marta Kostyuk, she refused to shake the hand of Victoria Azarenka after the game. Now, Kostyuk has form with this, but I mean, she was in her rights not to shake hands because even under COVID protocols, that was the thing they did. They touched rackets after matches. Yeah. Listening to Azarenka there, I mean, we'll speak about some other, the Ferro incident or Ferro situation just after this kind of little part. It does seem unfortunate this broke out because Azarenka would be the least likely person that you'd want to be going up against because she is a genuinely nice person.
Yeah, I suppose I have views on this, and a lot of it possibly comes down to my own views on Azarenka. As you said, she's in a very difficult position, as are a lot of athletes. A lot of athletes, we often say on the show, and we've discussed this, that athletes are in a position where they have a profile such that they need to speak out on various issues. In this instance, she, I think, had announced she was going to play in a tournament, which is sort of a Friends of Ukraine style tournament in the coming weeks. It's no longer, she's no longer going ahead in this. But I think what makes this situation a bit uncomfortable isn't the fact that she was being criticised for not coming out and openly condemning Russia and their actions in Ukraine. But it was the fact that, as she referenced in the interview there, she received a text beforehand to kind of say, I'm not going to shake your hand, this is why, or to that effect, basically. And I think she felt, as she said, she was open to talking to Kostyuk. She'd reached out to players previously. And I think something about I'm going to send you a text, and I think this permeates a lot of relationships in our society, is you have the opportunity to have a discussion with someone, find out what their position is. I don't think at any point, as Azarenka has said, she's pro the Russian stance on Ukraine. She's obviously Belarusian, and there's a difficulty there, or a conflict in terms of what it's felt by her opponent in that instance she needs to come out and do. And I don't like the idea of us telling an athlete what level of their media interaction is appropriate for her to be deemed to be condemning, because clearly she's reached out to players, and she also is a very strong voice in terms of tennis, in terms of women's players in particular. And I think that, and the issue we're going to move on to in a minute, is detracted from by someone deciding what level of your support is good enough. And I think if they'd had a discussion beforehand and then after that, the decision was, look, we're going to go with the COVID style, tap rackets. I'm not going to shake your hand. Then fine. But the fact that it was a text, and both parties have now said there was a text sent, have a discussion. You're adults, you're on a tour, you may be competitors, but this is a woman who, I suppose, if it was other people, I might take a very different view. But I think she has done nothing but always shown herself to be a consummate professional and an advocate for other competitors in her sport.
Very true. I mean, I know her personally from, we had a number of brief interactions because I was working with tennis players from Belarus. Always very helpful to younger players, to lower ranked players. You know, when they would go to America to tour, she would say, come stay with me. She helped the people all along. And I know, because I went into this before we kind of like set the topics for today's show, because I wanted to see what other people were thinking over, both Russians and Ukrainians as well. People were disappointed by Kostyuk, but not surprised. Azarenka was very, very to the fore. Like we scroll across here at the bottom of the screen, her statement, and she put herself out on a limb. A number of Russian and Belarusian players did as well. When even footballers like Fyodor Smolov, they said, no, stop the war. We want peace. We want peace. It does seem that, and I heard this back from one Russian tennis player who has just left the tour last year, and she said, even though, you know, many of her Ukrainian friends, they've stayed friends, they've spoken on things, and privately and publicly they're okay together. They said there are some of them, like Kostyuk, because again, she's a relatively young girl from a very well-connected family. It's kind of like you either condemn and hate, or you're not with them. So it's a strange kind of George Bush II thing.
I think it's possibly a very difficult position for people on either side here to be in, and particularly if you're a young person who's witnessing what's going on in terms of for your friends and family. All you want is bigger names than you, and let's face it, Kostyuk is she's a name in tennis, but you're talking about Azarenka, who's just so high profile. It's like having a Serena Williams, only she's Belarusian. In that sense, it's that high a profile. So I can understand you're almost trying to force someone to give the statement you want, but it's not a case of someone who hasn't condemned. It's just they haven't said exactly what you want, and it's a very difficult position for everyone to be in. I just hope that players will appreciate that there are other ways of going about things, and a discussion. If there had been a discussion, maybe my view would be differently, that they both looked at this and said, here's how we're going to deal with this. As Azarenka has said nothing but, I'm reaching out, I'm checking on Ukrainian competitors, Ukrainian players, they're my colleagues too, kind of thing. She's never said, well, you know, we're not having those discussions. And I think that's very important to recognize. I also think it's been, and just to move on to the other issue we're going to discuss, if you go online and you look up Azarenka at the moment, the first story you are going to get is going to be about this. And the second story is one that I think needed to get airtime in the last week. And unfortunately,
I was going to say, unfortunately, it hasn't. And I'm wondering, because I've seen tennis journalists or columnists or whatever they want to call themselves, like Simon Briggs and Kit Klarenberg, and then Ben Rothenberg, people who are three monkeys level of incompetence. They've seen no evil, they've heard no evil, and they won't speak about any of the evil that they have not seen or heard. People who have been informed about misdeeds from coaches, from officials, and they just keep quiet. Before we move on to that, that's the case, the Ferro case. The tournament you mentioned about the tennis place for peace, there was a number of players who were involved in this last week. Sorry, we said that, there's a comment in that Azarenka is very friendly to Ukraine. She keeps saying to have peace. That is true. With this, Kostyuk was one of the people who objected to Vika going into playing this tournament. She said no, she didn't want her to go into play. She felt uncomfortable. Other Ukrainian players who were there, Lesia Turenko, who's a good player, good doubles player as well, she was actually quite okay with it, but Kostyuk said no because she felt it was inappropriate. And the thing has gone from USTA removes, that's US Tennis Association, they have removed her. The Guardian were brilliant. They took a Reuters version of it, said that she pulls out, whereas Sports Illustrated says she was dropped from the Ukraine exhibition event. So, it was a difficult situation, and go ahead.
Me, I feel this is one of those things. The fact that she wanted to participate in the tournament, surely that is a very clear statement of what she feels is important here. And if you can't view participation in a tournament, which is literally friends of Ukraine, what more do you like? It's tennis for Ukraine. What do you need someone to do? Do they have to have it tattooed on their arm? Like, this is the thing that really bothers me here, that this isn't someone who is hiding behind. She's openly trying to participate. She's checking on Ukrainian colleagues. I just think that Kostya might have missed an opportunity here to have a huge name participating in a tournament that sends a very strong message of her thoughts on this.
This is it. And I mean, this is where we have to have a look as well at Kostyuk. I mean, she was a fabulous young junior. This is, of course, in March, the 2nd of March, when Azarenka came out and said that she was devastated by it. One of Kostyuk's points of view, or her reasoning behind not wanting a fellow tennis player to take part, and also not to shake hands, well, especially not to take part in this tournament, was that she related back. Could you imagine if the Jewish people, that a German tennis player wanted to go play an exhibition to raise funds for Jewish people? It just was ridiculous. But again, this is a girl who has been raised relatively in privilege. She's been backed by, the funny thing is, she has been financed the whole way through up until last year, that we know for sure, to December 2021, by Igor Kolomoisky. And that's, of course, the guy who financed Zelensky's rise to the top.
I think there's a real discomfort I have with her comments. I had forgotten about those comments. Like, put it this way, I think it misses a bigger picture, and it misses the point that your message, by trying to turn up for events or to raise funds for one side in any sort of conflict, sends a clear message that you are in support of the people who are suffering as a result. And it's unfortunate, because maybe I appreciate her position, but I just think she missed a big opportunity here to perhaps appreciate the message that was genuinely coming across.
True. So with that, a missed opportunity which has deflected from other terrific work and terrific viewpoints that Victoria Azarenka has made, and that's, of course, with the French tennis player Ferro, who recently came out with inappropriate sexual behavior and advances from coaches, and also in her own case, a really horrible situation. I've spoken about it, actually spoken about many, I've written about it, spoken about it on the radio, on this here as well. Tell us a bit about it, because this is something that really, I think everyone needs to hear, because it actually relates to what we're going to speak about with Joe Papp soon.
So a big part of what Fiona discussed was her abuse between the ages of 15 and 17 by a very specific coach, sexual abuse. And I think the big discussion that has come to the fore, and that may have been missed by a lot of media who are focusing on a handshake, was the fact that Azarenka was talking about the lack of safeguards, because again, she is a spokeswoman for the sport, talking about the lack of safeguards in place. She actually referenced, and I think this was the bit that really should have been picked up on by the media. She has a 5-year-old son. I could be wrong, he may be 4. And she said if she had a daughter, she would have to think carefully about having her participate. Now, not to disparage from the sport, I think it's the level of oversight. Who's checking? These are young women who, and again, young boys as well, let's not just be sexist in terms of it, but who are spending large amounts of time with a coach. Once they get to a higher level, they're often spending large amounts of time unsupervised. And I think if Fiona's case is just a really harrowing example of a young lady who, between, like, it's an extended period of time, it's a specific individual, and I think there has to be a point where tennis has to go. Tennis has done immense work on dealing with things like match fixing. The tennis integrity unit, they've gone, here is an issue in tennis that's huge. Let's throw everything we can at it. We may not fix it, but we're going to make every effort. And I just think if you put that much time into safeguarding for match fixing, you need to put 10 times that amount of time into safeguarding young people who are in a situation where it's not a team sport. There is a lot of alone time with a coach. There are long hours. There's a lot of lack of supervision. And you do, unfortunately, by the nature of the sport, you have parents who are particularly focused on their children being the best, who are not in a bad way, but they're trusting coaches who have got their children to this stage. And unfortunately, they're also, because of that level of trust, children are out of sight. And that's normal in a lot of sports. But you just need to look at ways to really safeguard. And I think 2 years of a young lady's life enduring such an abuse at the hands of someone who not only did she trust, but her family also trusted and other people around her. It's just it was harrowing to have the level of detail that was coming out. And it's also very important that this should be the main story right now in tennis, in the context of this is going to affect and continues to affect. Like, there is so limited in the safeguards that are in place. Like, you'd have nearly more safeguards in terms of if you're playing tennis in a school, because of the fact that everyone has to be vetted.
But Isa, they like that's bad for business. I can just tell you that here, and for parents as well. And I've told this story before about the young girl who I warned, a very well-known coach. I I've named him before, written him before, but he was from Belgium, now based in Switzerland, and the parents were sending their daughter there, and I said, don't send him there because he will abuse her. That's it. He's a pedophile. Don't send him there. And they were like, oh, well, we don't know. And the fun thing was, I said, look, this is what he's going to do. He's going to say, I always say, it's like she's bad balance, bad attitude, and she's overweight. And the girl was like a stick, 16-year-old stick. And the parents looked at each other and looked at me, and I said, you've already sent her there. I said, well, we sent her for a week. I said, well, I hope to God he hasn't started to abuse her. And the parents, the key thing was, that killed me. This is one of the reasons why I walked away from working with sports people. And I said, why would you put your child at that risk, you know? And the mother, the thing that sticks to me, the mother, she was like, well, he gets results. And so, this is the same, that's the killer. Parents are prepared to do it, and they send their kids to the best football coaches, the best basketball coaches, hockey coaches for success.
I always think the one thing that sticks in my mind when you think of the amount of trust and faith people put in coaches or in those associated with their coaching, and in fairness, the manipulation and the level of twisting that was done. But the likes of Larry Nassar with the gymnastics in the USA, he abused young ladies while their parents were in the room or just outside, because that's the level of manipulation in terms of, he was saying, because they trusted as a he's not a doctor in the true sense of the word, but because he was a medical professional in his area, that they trusted what he was saying and believed him. And I think where you're putting so much faith into someone, you're going to have parents who are going to trust that this person is the best at what he's doing. They're not going to overly quiz what's happening outside of the time or what's happening. Because also, parents have a thing of, they want to know how their children are doing in terms of results, but you don't want to push them away from a sport. So the onus goes not just from the parents now, the onus goes onto the sport. And that's where the onus needs to be, because you're also going to have kids coming into sports whose parents don't have that level of understanding, of questioning everything, of wanting to constantly be there. You're not going to have, every parent isn't going to be like, you're not going to have the Williamses where he's sitting in the crowd. He's there for everything. He's there as part of their lives. You're going to have parents who are out of sight, out of mind, can't control the situation, feel like you've kids going on scholarships, you've kids who are away from home. The sport has to protect them. And that's
but again, it's bad for business, because if they went to do it, and I reported this at different times, in a tournament in Šibenik in Croatia, I reported it, in England I reported it, in different places I've reported inappropriate behavior. Even in Egypt, I got one of my players to report, well, not got her, she said, what do I do? So she went and reported inappropriate behavior between either older players and players, coaches, and so on, and even grooming that was going on with older lesbian players. And when I reported it, when one of our players reported it, it was like, kind of like, do you want to be blacklisted? Do you want to be an outsider? You just shut your mouth and get on with it. So look, we're going